Get your filthy hands off that notebook now!
The whole room heard it. Dead silence. Grace held a page that had fallen from the table.
It dropped. I was just picking it to...
Don't!
Brenda stepped closer.
You scrub toilets.
Grace's hands trembled.
I know what I saw on that page.
Thought of a debt. And you think you're smarter than 200 geniuses?
Security came. Grace walked out past 30 silent faces. Not one person moved. But here's what nobody in that room understood. That notebook had crushed 200 elite experts for 8 months straight. All of them failed. And the only person alive who could decode it just got thrown out like she was nothing.
Unbelievable, right? But wait. Because what happened 6 hours before that moment changes everything. 6 hours earlier, 11:40 p.m. The 40th floor was empty. Just Grace, her mop cart, and the hum of machines left running overnight. She'd cleaned this floor for 2 years. The linguistics lab, the conference rooms, the walls covered in printouts of notebook pages nobody could read. Hundreds of symbols, strange markings, charts and sticky notes with question marks. Every night she glanced at them. Every night she looked a little longer. She never told anyone. Tonight, a draft of air pushed a printout off the edge of a desk. Page 94. It landed face up near her cart. Grace picked it up. Her breath stopped. In the bottom margin, a cluster of symbols she recognized. Not from any university, not from any training program. From a cracked green dictionary her grandmother gave her when she was 10 years old. She tilted the page under her cart's clip light. Her lips moved, sounding out shapes the way she'd done since childhood. One word, then another, then a phrase. It was Ge'ez, ancient Ethiopian script, but modified, blended with something else. A phonetic pattern she'd seen before in an old Occitan grammar book she'd found at Goodwill for $2. Her hands shook, not from fear, from recognition. She pulled the green dictionary from the bottom shelf of her cart, cross-referenced a root word, then another. Her pencil moved fast across a napkin. Fragments of meaning started connecting like puzzle pieces snapping into place. She was reading it, slowly, roughly, but reading what no one else could. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her. Arthur Voss, Edmund Calloway's personal assistant, had come back for a forgotten briefcase. He stood at the corner of the hallway and watched. 1 full minute. Grace hunched over the page, dictionary open, pencil moving. He raised his phone, took a photo of her handwritten notes, then left without a sound. Grace finished, placed the page back on the desk, wiped her fingerprints off the pencil, clocked out at 6 a.m. like every other night. She had no idea that photo was already on its way to a billionaire's bedside. Arthur Voss didn't sleep that night. He sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes staring at the photo on his phone. A napkin covered in handwriting. Symbols matched to English words. Clean, logical. Written by a janitor on a mop cart at midnight. By 6:15 a.m., he was at Edmund Calloway's recovery suite. Calloway had suffered a massive stroke 4 months ago. His left side was weak. His speech came in fragments. But his mind? His mind was untouched. Arthur placed the phone on the bedside tray. Calloway squinted at the screen. His fingers dragged the image wider. He stared at the margin notes Grace had written. His eyes changed. Not surprise, something deeper. He tapped the screen once, then again. He looked up at Arthur and mouthed a single word. Bring. Arthur understood. That afternoon, he made quiet arrangements. No announcements, no emails. He walked to the linguistics lab,
and placed 3 printouts on an empty table. Pages 94, 31, and 152. Beside them, a pencil and a fresh legal pad. No cameras were moved, no instructions were left, just the pages sitting there, a silent invitation that only one person would understand. Grace found them at 11:20 p.m.
She stood over the table for a long time, hands at her sides. She knew she'd been warned. Don't touch anything on this floor. Don't look at anything that isn't yours. But the pages were right there, open, waiting. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, dictionary on her lap, pencil in hand. And she began. Page 94, she already knew. The Ge'ez base with Occitan vowel shifts. She refined her earlier work, tightened the translation. The first full decoded sentence emerged. A principle about information asymmetry. Strategic, precise, worth millions in the right hands. Page 31 was harder. Heavier use of classical Nahuatl logograms. Symbols she'd seen in a free online course from a university in Mexico City. She cross-referenced from memory, found the substitution key buried in repeating patterns, cracked it, symbol by symbol. Page 152 almost broke her. A dense wall of Old Church Slavonic syntax fused with mathematical notation and glyphs she'd never encountered. She filled 6 pages of the legal pad with attempts, crossed things out, started over. Her jaw tightened, sweat beaded along her hairline. At 2:40 a.m., she leaned back against the wall, closed her eyes, breathed. Then she opened them, picked up the pencil again. By 4:15 a.m., she'd mapped 60% of the symbol set on page 152. Not a full translation, but a structural key, a framework that showed how the cipher worked. She wrote notes in the margins explaining the linguistic logic behind each layer. 4 hours, 3 pages, 1 legal pad filled front and back. She hadn't eaten. She'd barely blinked. Her fingers were smudged with graphite. The only moment she smiled was when a phrase on page 31 clicked into place. A private, quiet smile that no one saw. Grace left the legal pad on the table, wiped the pencil clean, pushed her mop cart to the elevator, clocked out at 6 a.m. Like every other night. By 6:30 a.m., the legal pad was in Calloway's hands. Arthur watched the old man read every page, twice. His fingers traced Grace's handwriting the way a jeweler examines a stone. Slow, careful, certain. Calloway set the pad down, looked at Arthur. All of it, he said. 2 words, the most he'd spoken in months. Give her all of it. Downstairs, Grace Taylor was waiting for the bus home. Earbuds in, eyes half closed. She had no idea what she'd just set in motion. Nah, this is insane. Imagine you're mopping floors at midnight, and you crack something 200 experts couldn't. No degree, no team, just you and a dictionary from your grandma. And nobody even knows. How would you feel? Grace Taylor grew up in Wilkes County, Georgia, a small town where nothing moved fast, and nobody expected much from a girl like her. Her father left before she could walk. Her mother died when Grace was 9, a car accident on a highway shoulder. She'd pulled over to change a flat tire. A truck came too fast. Grace didn't learn the details until she was 15. She wished she never had. After that, it was just her and Nora. Nora Williams. 78 years old now, retired school teacher. The kind of woman who ironed her church dress on Saturday night and had dinner ready by 5 every single day of her life. Nora's house was small. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. But the books were everywhere. Floor to ceiling,
stacked on counters, piled beside the bed, grammar textbooks in French and Portuguese, old missionary dictionaries from countries most people couldn't find on a map, a box of cassette tapes, Berlitz language courses from the 1980s, sitting next to the radio in the kitchen. Nora spoke 3 languages herself. She believed language was the one door nobody could lock. On Grace's 10th birthday, Nora gave her a pocket dictionary. English to Amharic. Green cover, cracked spine, cost $2 at a church yard sale. Inside the front cover, Nora had written 6 words in blue ink. Words are free, baby. Learn them. Grace did. By 16, she could read in 5 languages. By 20, 8. She taught herself from library discards, free internet courses at the public branch, and Nora's old tapes rewound so many times the ribbon warped. She never went to college. Couldn't afford the application fee, let alone tuition. She moved to Boston at 22. Janitorial work was the only job that didn't ask for a resume she couldn't fill. But here's what nobody understood about Grace. She didn't dream of being discovered. She'd been invisible her whole life, and she'd made peace with it. Language wasn't a career path. It wasn't a plan. It was the one thing that was hers. Private. Sacred. The one place where she was free. That's what made Brenda's words cut so deep. It wasn't just humiliation. It was someone reaching into the only space Grace had and telling her she didn't belong there either. The call came at 5:45 a.m. Grace had just clocked out. Arthur Voss. She'd never spoken to the man before. He said 3 sentences. Mr. Calloway would like to meet you. Rooftop garden. 6:30 a.m. Grace almost hung up. She thought she was being fired. She looked down at herself. Gray uniform, scuffed sneakers, a coffee stain on her left sleeve from the break room. She didn't have time to change. She didn't own anything better in her locker anyway. She went. The rooftop garden sat on the 52nd floor. Open sky. Boston's harbor stretched out below. The morning air was cold and sharp. Grace had never been up here. Janitors didn't get rooftop access. Edmund Calloway was already there. Wheelchair. Thin blanket across his lap. His left hand rested on the armrest, still weak from the stroke. But his eyes were locked on Grace from the moment she stepped through the glass door. Arthur stood beside him. He placed the legal pad on the table between them. Grace's handwriting, her translations, her margin notes. Mr. Calloway would like you to explain what you did, Arthur said. Take your time. Grace stared at the legal pad. She'd never explained her process to anyone. Not once in her life. There was never anyone to explain it to. She started slow. The base layer is Ge'ez. It's an ancient Ethiopian script. I recognized it because my grandmother had a dictionary that used the same writing system. She pointed to the phonetic markings. These are Occitan vowel shifts, Provençal dialect. I taught myself from a grammar book I found at Goodwill. $2 bin. She moved to page 31. The logograms here are classical Nahuatl. I picked them up from a free course online. A university in Mexico offered it for nothing. Arthur glanced at Calloway. The old man hadn't blinked. I don't have a degree, Grace said quietly. I just read a lot of old stuff nobody else wanted. Silence. The harbor wind pushed Grace's hair across her face. She didn't move to fix it. She was bracing for the rejection she'd felt her entire life. Calloway leaned forward, slowly, with effort. He reached across the table and tapped the legal pad once with his right hand. Then he looked at Arthur. When he spoke, it was the first clear sentence he'd formed since his stroke. 4 words. Quiet. Certain. Bring her everything.
Grace blinked. What does that mean? Arthur slid a key card across the table. White plastic, her name printed on the front. Level 5 clearance. It means Mr. Calloway wants you to decode the entire notebook, Arthur said. All 200 pages. Grace looked at the key card, then at Calloway, then back at the card. I'm the janitor, she said. Arthur's expression didn't change. Mr. Calloway doesn't care what your badge says. Grace picked up the key card, held it with both hands like it might disappear. She'd never had a card with her name on it that opened anything important. She slipped it into her back pocket, right next to the green dictionary. She didn't know it yet, but the moment that key card touched that dictionary, everything was about to change. And not everyone in that building was going to be happy about it. The news traveled fast. By noon, the entire 40th floor knew. A new consultant had been granted Level 5 access to Calloway's notebook. Full clearance, no restrictions. Brenda Whitfield found out at 12:15 p.m. She was mid-sentence in a team briefing when Stuart Nolan leaned over and whispered the name. She stopped talking. The janitor? Stuart nodded. Brenda didn't yell. She didn't slam the table. She set her pen down with the kind of calm that made everyone in the room stop breathing. She found Arthur Voss outside Calloway's suite 14 minutes later. This is a national-level cryptolinguistic project. Her voice was measured, professional, but her eyes were not. 8 months of work by credentialed experts, peer-reviewed professionals, and you're handing the keys to a woman who empties trash cans? Arthur didn't flinch. Her translation of page 94 was more accurate than anything your team produced in 8 months. Brenda smiled, the kind of smile that has no warmth in it. We'll see. Within 48 hours, she had her counter-move ready. She filed a formal request for what she called a quality assurance evaluation. Any outside consultant must pass a standardized linguistic assessment before accessing further materials. Standard procedure, she argued, nothing personal. Stuart Nolan backed her immediately. He knew which side his career was buttered on. A 3-person evaluation panel was formed. Brenda, Stuart, and Dr. Helen Prescott, a retired Oxford linguist flown in as a neutral third party. The test was scheduled for Friday. Meanwhile, the Whisper Network did what Whisper Networks do. The janitor, who reads ancient languages. Have you heard? Some people laughed. A few were curious. Most shook their heads and went back to their coffee. But the small things told the real story. A senior analyst moved his coffee cup to the far side of the table when Grace walked past, as if her presence might contaminate it. Someone left a sticky note on the workspace Arthur had prepared for Grace. 5 words in black marker. Janitor's closet is on B2. Brenda sent 2 emails to the department that week, referring to Grace as the cleaning girl. Arthur printed both and showed them to Grace, not to hurt her, to prepare her. Grace read them in the break room at 2 a.m. Alone. The fluorescent light buzzed above her head. The vending machine hummed in the corner. She folded the printouts neatly, set them aside. Then she opened the green dictionary to the first page. Nora's handwriting. Blue ink. 6 words. Words are free, baby. Learn them. She closed it, straightened her back, took a breath. Desmond Cole found her there 10 minutes later. The overnight security guard. Quiet guy. The only person in the building who said good morning to her every single shift. He sat down across from her. Didn't ask what was wrong. He already knew. They're setting this whole thing up so you fail, he said. You know that, right? Grace nodded slowly. I know. So what are you going to do? Grace looked at him. For the first time in days, something steady came back into her eyes. I'm going to walk in there on Friday. And I'm going to show them what I see when I look at that notebook. Desmond leaned back, crossed his arms. Good. Friday was 3 days away. The evaluation panel was ready. Brenda had designed every question herself, and she'd added one test that wasn't in the official protocol, a trap, built specifically to make Grace look like a fraud in front of everyone who mattered. Friday, 9 a.m. Main conference room. Grace had never entered through the front of this room before. She'd only ever cleaned it, vacuumed the carpet, wiped the table, emptied the trash bin by the door. Now she sat at the head of that same table. Brenda Whitfield sat across from her, posture perfect, arms folded. Beside her, Stuart Nolan with a legal pad and a face that said he'd already made up his mind. At the far end, Dr. Helen Prescott, 70 years old, silver hair pulled back tight. She wore no expression at all. She simply watched. 14 other senior staff lined the walls. Word had spread. Nobody wanted to miss this. Arthur Voss stood by the door. He gave Grace one small nod. That was all. Brenda didn't waste time. Part A, identification. She clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up. 10 script samples, ancient, obscure, from civilizations most people had never heard of.
Identify the language, era, and region of origin. You have 10 minutes. Grace didn't need 10. She went through them one by one. Steady, unhurried. Aramaic, 1st century, Mesopotamia. Tamil Brahmi, 3rd century BCE, southern India. Tibetan Uchen, 7th century, Central Plateau. 9 out of 10. Correct. On the 6th sample, she paused mid-sentence, tilted her head, then corrected herself. No. Wait, that's not Sumerian. The wedge angle is wrong. That's a Neo-Elamite variant. 2nd millennium BCE, southwestern Iran. She was right. Brenda's jaw tightened. She clicked to the next test. Part B, live decoding. A fresh page from Calloway's notebook appeared on screen. Page 203, never before analyzed. 30 minutes, Brenda said. Grace stood, walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker. The room went quiet. Not polite quiet, holding their breath quiet. She worked in silence, mapping symbols, cross-referencing from memory. No books, no dictionary, just the marker and her mind. At minute 11, she paused, stared at a cluster of glyphs in the lower right corner. Her hand hovered over the board. Then it clicked. The marker moved faster now, connections branching out like roots finding water. Layer by layer, the cipher peeled open under her hands. At minute 22, she stepped back, 80% decoded. She turned to the room and read the translation aloud. Her voice was calm, clear, every word precise. Nobody moved. Stuart Nolan uncrossed his arms. Dr. Prescott tilted her head slightly, the first visible reaction she'd shown all morning. Brenda's face was stone. Part C. A new image filled the screen, another notebook page, or so it appeared. Same exercise, Brenda said. Take your time. Grace studied the screen. Her eyes moved across the symbols slowly, left to right, top to bottom, then back again. 90 seconds passed. Grace set the marker down. This isn't from the notebook. The room shifted. The symbol frequency is artificial, Grace said. No natural language or cipher produces this distribution pattern. The clusters repeat at fixed intervals. No human writing system does that. She looked directly at Brenda. Someone fabricated this. Dead silence. Brenda didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her face said everything. Stuart Nolan stared at the table. 2 people along the wall exchanged a glance. Dr. Helen Prescott removed her glasses. Slowly. She leaned back in her chair. The faintest trace of a smile crossed her face. She picked up her pen and wrote a single word on her evaluation sheet. Extraordinary. Grace didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't even look around the room. She picked up the green dictionary from the table where she'd set it before the test, slipped it into her back pocket, and walked out the same door she used to enter, pushing a mop cart. Behind her, silence. The kind that changes things. Dr. Helen Prescott didn't go back to her hotel that evening. She asked Arthur Voss for one thing: a quiet room and 30 minutes with Grace Taylor. Not the conference room, not Calloway's office. Somewhere neutral. Arthur offered the small library on the 12th floor. Prescott accepted. She was already seated when Grace arrived, 2 cups of tea on the table between them, steam curling in the late afternoon light. A small detail, but Grace noticed. Nobody at this company had ever offered her a seat, let alone tea. "Sit down," Prescott said. Not an order, an invitation. Grace sat. She kept the green dictionary in her lap, a habit, a security blanket she'd never admit to. Prescott didn't start with the evaluation. She didn't mention the test scores or the fabricated page. She asked something no one in this building had ever asked Grace. "Where did you learn?" Grace told her. All of it. The grandmother in Georgia, the house full of books nobody else wanted, the cassette tapes rewound until the ribbon warped, the Goodwill grammar books, the free internet courses at the public library where she'd sit for 6 hours on her day off until the librarian told her they were closing. Prescott listened without interrupting. Her tea went cold. When Grace finished, there was a long pause. Prescott set her glasses on the table, folded her hands. "I've spent 38 years in linguistics," she said. "I've supervised dissertations at Oxford, Cambridge, the Sorbonne. I've examined thousands of students across 4 decades. She paused. "In that time, I've met 3 people with what I call polyglot intuition, the ability to feel the internal logic of a language before formally studying it, to hear the architecture beneath the words." She looked directly at Grace. "You're the 4th. And you may be the most naturally gifted of them all." Grace's hands tightened around the dictionary. She didn't speak. Prescott wasn't finished. That evening she contacted Calloway directly, not through Arthur, a personal call to his recovery suite. She recommended that Grace be given full, unrestricted access to the notebook, not as a consultant, not as an assistant, as the lead decoder. Prescott offered to serve as Grace's academic sponsor, formalizing her work so it carried institutional weight, publishing rights, citation authority, the kind of legitimacy that opens doors Grace never knew existed. Calloway signed the authorization from his bed, didn't hesitate, didn't ask for a second opinion. The next morning, Arthur met Grace at the security desk. He handed her a new keycard, white plastic, same as before. But the name line was different. Grace Taylor, Senior Cryptolinguistic Analyst. Grace stared at it. Her thumb traced the letters of the title, her lips pressed together, not a smile, something deeper, something she didn't have a word for yet. She slipped the card into her back pocket, right next to the green dictionary. 2 things in one pocket now, a $2 dictionary from a churchyard sale, and a title nobody in this building ever imagined she'd hold. Down the hall, Brenda Whitfield was clearing her personal items from the lead analyst's office. She hadn't been fired. She'd been reassigned to a review role, support capacity. She carried the box to her new desk without a word, but her hands were shaking. And she wasn't done. Grace drove 6 hours south on Saturday morning. No flight. She couldn't justify the cost. Not yet. The new title didn't come with a paycheck until the paperwork cleared. So she drove. Windows down, radio off, just the highway and her thoughts. Wilkes County, Georgia looked the same as it always did. Red clay shoulders along the road, pine trees so thick the sunlight had to fight through. The smell of earth and rain and something sweet she could never quite name. Nora's house sat at the end of a gravel path, white paint peeling at the corners. a porch swing that creaked whether anyone sat in it or not. And through the screen door, the smell of cinnamon and old paper. Nora was on the porch waiting. She always knew when Grace was coming. She said she could feel it in her knees. Grace sat beside her on the swing. For a while, neither of them spoke. Just the cicadas, the creak of the wood, sweet tea sweating in mason jars on the railing. Then Grace told her everything. The notebook, the symbols, the midnight translations, the evaluation, the new title on the key card. All of it. Nora listened the way she always listened, still, patient, hands folded over her apron. When Grace finished, she waited for the reaction, the pride, the celebration. Nora had earned this moment more than anyone. But Nora didn't celebrate. She turned to Grace, her eyes, clouded now with age but still sharp underneath, searched her granddaughter's face. "Do they see you, baby?" she asked. "Not what you can do. You." Grace opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't have an answer. The swing creaked. A mockingbird called from the pine tree by the fence. Then Nora told Grace something she'd never shared before. In 1968, I applied to be a librarian at the county library. I had a master's degree in education. I spoke 3 languages. I'd been teaching for 11 years. She paused. Her scarred hands, rough from decades of teaching and gardening, smoothed the fabric of her apron. The director looked me in the eye and said, "We don't need anyone to organize the colored section." Grace's chest tightened. "I never applied anywhere again," Nora said. "I bought my own books instead." The words sat between them, like something heavy and fragile at the same time. Grace understood now. The house full of books, the dictionaries in languages nobody in Wilkes County spoke, the cassette tapes, the green pocket dictionary. Nora built her own library because the world wouldn't let her into theirs. And Grace's entire life, every language she'd taught herself, every late night at the public branch, every page she'd decoded on a mop cart at midnight, was the inheritance of that same quiet resistance. Nora reached beneath her chair and pulled out a small notebook, leather cover, worn soft at the edges. She placed it in Grace's hands. "My grammar notes," Nora said. "Languages I studied when I still thought someone would let me use them." Grace opened it. Neat handwriting, French verb conjugations, Portuguese phonetics, notes on Amharic sentence structure. Decades of knowledge written by a woman the world told to stop reaching. "I never got to use these," Nora said. She placed her hand over Grace's, warm, steady. "You will." Grace held the notebook against her chest. She didn't cry, but her jaw trembled, and she stayed on that porch a long time after Nora went inside. When she finally stood up, the sun was low, the porch swing still rocking behind her. She drove back to Boston that night, the green dictionary on the passenger seat, Nora's notebook beside it. She had work to do, and the hardest part was still ahead. Grace worked 16-hour days for 3 straight weeks, a private office on the 40th floor. The same floor she used to mop. Same carpet, same view of the harbor. But now, there was a desk with her name on it. The green dictionary sat on the left corner. Nora's notebook on the right. Calloway's original pages spread across the center. She built the master key 1 layer at a time. It took her 4 days just to confirm the base structure. 7 layers. Not 5 like the experts assumed. Not 6 like the closest team had guessed. 7. Layer 1. Ge'ez script, the skeleton. Ancient Ethiopian characters forming the bones of every page. Layer 2. Occitan vowel substitution. The sounds shifted through a dialect most modern linguists had never studied outside of textbooks. Layer 3. Classical Nahuatl logograms. Symbols representing entire concepts compressed into single marks. Layer 4. Modified Pitman shorthand. Speed writing. Callaway's personal adaptation of a system invented in the 1800s. Layer 5. Mathematical notation. Original symbols for numbers and quantitative relationships. No published key. Pure invention. Layer 6. Old Church Slavonic syntax. The grammar that held everything together. Sentences structured in a language dead for centuries. Layer 7. Personal glyphs. Invented from scratch. Symbols for names, dates, proprietary terms that existed only in Callaway's mind. That was why 200 experts failed. Each one knew a piece. A Ge'ez scholar could read Layer 1 but hit a wall at Layer 2. A cryptographer could crack the shorthand but couldn't parse the Slavonic grammar underneath. The AI teams found patterns but couldn't assign meaning. Everyone was looking through their own keyhole. Nobody had the full ring of keys. Grace did. Not because she was smarter than all of them, but because her education was built from the same chaos Callaway had used. Discarded books, dead languages, forgotten systems. She learned the way he wrote, sideways, through back doors, from sources nobody in the mainstream thought to look at. And Layer 7, the personal glyphs, she cracked because she'd cleaned his office for 2 years. She knew which books sat on his shelf. She'd seen the spines, dusted them, read the titles out of habit. His references were her references, not by design, by proximity. By the end of week 2, she had a 40-page master key, a Rosetta Stone for the entire notebook. Then Brenda made her move. A formal complaint filed with the board of directors. Breach of protocol. Unvetted personnel handling sensitive intellectual property. Potential corporate espionage. The language was legal, but the intent was clear. Kill the project. Remove Grace. An emergency board meeting was scheduled for Thursday. 15 directors, 3 outside counsel. If the board ruled against Grace, the project would be suspended and she'd be terminated immediately. Arthur brought her the news at 9 p.m. on Monday. Grace was still at her desk. Page 146 open in front of her, pencil in hand. She didn't panic. She didn't argue. She asked for one thing. Let me present the translation myself. Arthur hesitated. Grace, these are board members, corporate lawyers. This isn't... If what I decoded is real, the work speaks for itself. She looked at him, steady. If it's not, I'll leave. No fight. Arthur stared at her for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and made the call. Thursday, 10 a.m., boardroom, 52nd floor. 15 directors seated around a mahogany table. 3 attorneys with open laptops. Stuart Nolan in a navy suit pretending to review notes. Brenda Whitfield at the far end, composed, prepared, certain. Dr. Helen Prescott sat near the window, quiet, watching. And on the wall-mounted screen, Edmund Callaway, live from his recovery suite. The first time he'd appeared before the board since his stroke. His face was thinner, but his eyes were the same. Grace entered carrying one folder. She was wearing her janitor's work pants, gray, creased, the same ones she wore every shift. She hadn't had time to change. She'd been translating until 4 a.m. and came straight from her desk. The green dictionary was in her back pocket. 15 directors looked at her, some confused, some skeptical. One almost laughed. Grace set the folder on the table, opened it. This is the complete decoded translation of Mr. Callaway's notebook. 214 pages. Every symbol, every layer. She let that land. The notebook contains a strategic framework Mr. Calloway called the Quiet Architecture. It includes protocols for ethical data governance, guidelines for artificial intelligence deployment, a philanthropic structure allocating $3 billion, and a merger framework that anticipates regulatory changes 5 years from now. The room shifted. Finance directors leaned forward. An attorney stopped typing. I'll walk you through 3 sample pages. Then, I'd like one of you to choose a random page I haven't seen before, and I'll decode it live. Brenda's expression didn't change, but her pen stopped moving. Grace began. Page 94. She broke down each cipher layer on the whiteboard. Ge'ez base, Occitan phonetics, Nahuatl logograms. She showed the master key, showed the logic, every step traceable, every connection verifiable. Page 31. Faster now. The room was leaning in. Stuart Nolan had forgotten to pretend he wasn't impressed. Page 152. The hardest page. The one that had nearly broken her at 2:40 a.m. 3 weeks ago. She decoded it completely, read the translation aloud without pausing. Then she stepped back. Pick a page. A director near the center, gray-haired, reading glasses on a chain, opened the original notebook to a random spread. Page 189. He held it up. Grace studied it for 60 seconds. Her eyes moved across the symbols. Her hand found the marker. She turned to the whiteboard and wrote, layer by layer, symbol by symbol. The room was silent except for the squeak of the marker. 3 minutes. She stepped back, read the decoded text aloud. A strategic directive on data privacy. Specific, detailed, language that only Calloway could have authored. Every head turned to the screen. Calloway's face filled the monitor. He'd been watching without moving, without blinking. When Grace finished, he leaned toward the camera. His voice was slow, every word deliberate, the effort of speech visible in the tension of his jaw. That is exactly what I wrote. He paused. Every word. His eyes were wet. The room didn't breathe. Dr. Prescott closed her notebook. Brenda Whitfield sat motionless. Stuart Nolan stared at the table. The board voted. Unanimous. The Quiet Architecture Framework was adopted effective immediately, and Grace Taylor was appointed to a position that had never existed until that morning. Director of Linguistic Strategy. Grace stood by the whiteboard, marker still in her hand, the green dictionary in her back pocket. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The work had spoken, and every single person in that room heard it. The first thing Grace did with her new title surprised everyone. Arthur handed her the offer letter that afternoon. Full compensation, benefits, equity stake, a corner office on the 40th floor with a view of the harbor she'd only ever seen through windows she was cleaning. Grace read it twice, signed it, then made one request. Can I keep my night shift locker? Arthur blinked. Your locker? Downstairs, B2, next to the supply room. She paused. I want to remember where I started. Arthur didn't argue. The company issued a press release the following Monday. Carefully worded, approved by legal, but the facts were too remarkable to stay inside corporate language for long. By Tuesday evening, the story had leaked. Janitor decodes what 200 experts couldn't. It hit local news first, then national, then everywhere. The headlines spread across social media like something people had been waiting to share without knowing it. CNN called. NBC called. The New York Times sent an email requesting an exclusive profile. 3 podcasts, 2 documentary producers, a literary agent. Grace declined all of them. For 1 full week, she said nothing to any journalist. She went to her new office every morning, worked on cataloging the Decoded notebook, ate lunch alone in the 12th floor library where Prescott had first offered her tea. She wasn't hiding. She just wasn't ready to be seen on anyone's terms but her own. While Grace worked in silence, the world outside kept moving. Dr. Helen Prescott returned to Oxford and did something she hadn't done in 11 years. She published a letter. Not in a newspaper, in the Journal of Applied Linguistics, the most respected publication in the field. The letter was 4 pages long. In it, she called Grace the most significant natural cryptolinguist of the 21st century. She argued that institutional credentialing had created a blind spot so wide that a genius could mop floors for 2 years inside a building full of experts and never once be seen. She called for reform. New pathways for self-taught linguists, recognition frameworks that measured ability instead of diplomas. The letter was downloaded 14,000 times in its first week. But the thing that broke Grace, the thing she never saw coming, happened on a Tuesday morning. She was walking through the lobby, coffee in one hand, keycard in the other. Same route she'd taken every day as a janitor, except now she turned left toward the elevators, instead of right toward the supply closet. She almost missed it. A brass plaque, new, mounted on the wall beside the main entrance. She stopped, read it once, then again. The Nora Williams Linguistic Fellowship, a full scholarship for self-taught language learners from underserved communities. Beneath the title, an inscription. For every door that was locked, and every mind that found another way in. Edmund Callaway had established it, named it himself, without telling Grace, without asking permission. Grace stood in front of that plaque for a long time. Her coffee went cold in her hand. Her right hand moved to her back pocket and found the green dictionary. She held it without pulling it out. Desmond Cole, the security guard who'd said good morning to her every single shift for 2 years, walked up beside her. He read the plaque. He looked at Grace. He didn't say anything. He just stood there with her. 2 people who knew what it meant to be invisible in a building full of important people. 3 weeks later, Nora Williams flew to Boston. Grace paid for the ticket. First flight of Nora's life. She gripped the armrest from takeoff to landing and told the flight attendant she preferred trains. Nora walked into the CGA lobby wearing her best church dress, cream-colored, pressed that morning at the hotel. Her shoes were polished, her silver hair pinned back the way she always wore it on Sundays. She saw the plaque, her name, in brass, on the wall of a building she'd never imagined entering. She reached out and touched it, one finger tracing each letter. Her hand trembled. Not from age, from something that didn't have a name. She turned to Grace. Her eyes were full. I told you, baby. Words are free. That evening, Callaway Global Analytics hosted the fellowship's inaugural reception. The atrium on the ground floor. 200 guests, board members, linguists, journalists, university deans. The kind of room Grace used to enter only after everyone else had left. Edmund Callaway stood at the podium, standing, for the first time since his stroke. Arthur hovered close behind him, ready. But Callaway held himself upright, both hands on the lectern. His voice was slow and rough. Every word cost him effort, and every word landed. I spent my career believing I was the smartest person in most rooms. I built systems. I wrote in codes no one could read. I was proud of that. He paused, took a breath. It took a stroke and a janitor to teach me that I'd spent 40 years walking past brilliance I never thought to look for. The room was still. Grace Taylor didn't just decode my notebook. She decoded something I'd been blind to my entire life. The idea that talent doesn't always come in the package you expect. He looked at Grace. She was standing near the back, close to the door. Old habits. "Grace, come up here." She walked to the podium. No notes, no prepared speech. She carried one thing, the green dictionary. She held it up so the room could see it. Small, cracked spine, faded green cover. "This was my first textbook," she said. "It cost $2 at a church sale in Georgia." She opened it to the front cover. Nora's handwriting, blue ink. "My grandmother wrote 6 words in this book. Words are free, baby. Learn them. Everything I know started here." She closed the dictionary. "I mopped the floors of this building for 2 years. I cleaned the conference rooms where people were trying to crack a code I could read. Nobody ever asked me what I knew. Nobody ever looked." She paused. The room held still. No wall held me. But that's not the point. The point is, there shouldn't have been a wall in the first place. 90 seconds. That was all she needed. She stepped back from the podium. The applause started slow, and then it didn't stop. Nora sat in the front row, hands folded, tears running down her face, not wiping them, not hiding them. 3 weeks after the reception, Brenda Whitfield resigned. No public statement, no scene. She sent a one-line email to Grace's new address. "I underestimated you. That's my failure, not yours." Grace read it once. She didn't respond, but she saved the email, and she kept it. Stuart Nolan stayed at the company. Quieter now. He started mentoring junior analysts that fall, showing up earlier, listening more. Whether it was genuine change or self-preservation, the story doesn't say. Some things are for the audience to decide. On the first day of the Nora Williams Fellowship, the morning the first scholarship recipient arrived at CGA, a package was waiting on her desk. A pocket dictionary, English to Amharic, green cover, same edition as Grace's, found on eBay for $12. Inside the front cover, Grace's handwriting, black ink. "Someone believed in you before you walked through this door. Now walk." So where are they now? Grace Taylor leads a team of 12 at Callaway Global Analytics. She hired 3 of the Nora Williams Fellows as her first analysts. None of them had degrees. All of them had something no university could teach: the instinct to see what others overlook. Her office is on the 40th floor. Same carpet she used to vacuum. Same windows she used to wipe down on Tuesday nights. The only difference now is the nameplate on the door. And the green dictionary, still on her desk, left corner, always. Edmund Callaway returned to work part-time 6 months after his stroke. He walks with a cane now. His speech is slower. But every Thursday morning at 7 a.m., he takes the elevator to the rooftop garden and sits across from Grace. Same table, same 2 chairs, same view of the harbor. They don't talk about the notebook anymore. They talk about language, about education, about who gets seen and who gets skipped. Sometimes they sit in silence and just drink their coffee. It's enough. Dr. Helen Prescott co-authored a paper with Grace for the journal Linguistic Inquiry. Grace's name appears first. The paper has been cited over 200 times. Prescott calls it the proudest publication of her career. Nora's house in Wilkes County still stands at the end of that gravel path. Same peeling white paint, same creaking porch swing. But there's something new beside the front door. A small brass plaque. Grace had it made and drove down to install it herself. The First Library of Grace Taylor.
Nora sees it every morning when she steps out for the paper. She never mentions it, but her neighbor says she polishes it once a week. Desmond Cole got promoted to head of building security at CGA. Grace wrote his recommendation letter herself. 3 paragraphs. The last line read, "He was the only person in this building who saw me before anyone else did." Late at night, sometimes Grace still works on the 40th floor, alone. Old habit. The building is quiet. The harbor lights reflect off the glass. But she's not mopping anymore. She sits at her desk, Calloway's notebook open beside her. Not decoding, writing. Her own notes, her own system, her own hybrid script built from every language she's ever loved. In the margin of the first page, a small drawing, a green book, cracked spine, faded cover. She smiles, puts the pencil down, goes home. A $2 dictionary, a mop, and a mind no wall could hold. Remember that. Man, this breaks me. Imagine you're mopping floors every night in a room full of geniuses, and you're the one with the answer. But nobody asks. Nobody looks. Would you stay silent? Tell me in the comments. Like, share, subscribe.